Welcome back to the Inside Nebraska Recruiting Blitz podcast. In this week's edition, I'm joined today by Rivals National Rankings Director Adam Friedman. Adam, welcome back to the show. We're happy to have you. Got a lot to discuss with the 2026 Rivals 250 getting a preseason update. I guess for the fans, what went into this update?
The preseason update, everything that went into there was the all-star camps. So think Rivals 5-star, think Elite 11, think some of those major college camps that happen in July and early August. So evals from all of those events help shape this rankings update, along with just new information gathered on players from around the country. Even if they didn't do one of those major summer events, we still were gathering information on other players from around the country. I did a camp in Pittsburgh, for example, and saw a lot of great prospects out there. So, there were other events going on. And even if they, like I said, even if they weren't at events, we were still gathering information about players.
For sure. And, this one in particular, kind of talking about the Rivals 5-star, I guess we can start here with the Rivals 5-star attendee. And I guess one of the bigger headlines of the last week, Nebraska is going to get 4-star Miami linebacker commit Jordan Campbell in for a visit for the Colorado game. This will be his first visit to Nebraska and one of the only, if not the only visit he has set for the season outside of Miami. One of the biggest risers as well in this rankings update. Kind of what led to the bump for him and kind of what do you see in him? Obviously, he's starting at a new school this fall, but kind of what have you seen from him this offseason?
Well, we've loved Jordan Campbell every time we've seen him, right? I mean, we got him into the Rivals 250 in February. He was like number 228. Then we saw him multiple times during the spring camp season there, and he rose 83 spots in the June Rivals 250 update. He was then number 145. And after we saw him again perform on an even bigger stage at the Rivals 5-star in late June, he's now up 95 more spots to number 50 overall in the 2026 Rivals 250. That should tell you exactly what we think of him. We love everything we've seen from him so far. He's got elite measurables, 6'2", 210 pounds, a massive wingspan that's 6'10 and a half, and 34-inch arms. It's hard to build a linebacker, an off-the-ball linebacker at that, better than that. He does have room to fill out, so we'll see how things go there over those next 2 years of high school. But he's got the speed to cover running backs and tight ends in the open field. He knows how to use those long arms to get his hands on the ball, and he's got an aggressive style. He is not just going to sit back there and finesse guys when he's in coverage, or slip by linemen during running plays. He's a guy who is going to come downhill during running plays, make plays in the backfield. He's got speed to go sideline to sideline. He's going to fend off offensive linemen to go make the play, and in coverage, he's going to bump running backs. He's going to bump those tight ends and get his hands on the ball. I mean, he's a really impressive athlete, and I think there's room for him to potentially move up depending on what he shows on film this fall and how that production fares, and what we see more out of him from a speed perspective.
For sure. And obviously a long-standing Miami commit, been committed since the fall. So I guess, kind of a bit of a surprise that he's making some visits exploring, especially so far from home. But Nebraska's had some success in South Florida over the last couple of years. Just this last cycle, pulled Ja'Cory Barney, pulled Vincent Shavers, pulled Willis McGahee DeFort. All three project to contribute this year for Nebraska. Larry Tarver as well. All four actually project to contribute for Nebraska this fall. And so Nebraska's hoping, just seeing, Vincent Shavers, for example, a guy that Campbell's familiar with, just seeing him on the field so early in a game like that Colorado game where all the eyes will be on Nebraska, make some kind of impact on him where, he can come into Nebraska and have a similar type of early impact with the program. Another top 50 guy that also very recently visited Nebraska, Vance Spafford. This is somewhat new on Nebraska's radar. He was offered in July by Jamar Mosey and kind of made that visit without really telling anyone. Kind of was supposed to show up at Oregon and had debated some other visits kind of on the West Coast, but ended up only showing up to Nebraska that last weekend of July. Spent the weekend in Nebraska. And another one, a massive riser, or maybe one of the biggest risers in the class. What did y'all see from Vance? I know that's a guy, talking to Gorney and people around the team, that's a guy that this Rivals is pretty high on.
Yeah, we love what we've seen from Vance as well. Super productive 2026 receiver out of that Southwest area there, I believe. He was the biggest riser, like you said, in the 2026 rankings update, 135 spots up. Very much one of the top receivers in this class. Like I mentioned, incredibly productive during the season. He's been timed at a sub 4.4 in the 40-yard dash. He's not going to overwhelm anybody with his size or really his strength, but he is an elite route runner who can create separation with his speed as well as his footwork and sharp cutting abilities. There's a lot of comparisons to, I should say cliche comparisons to NFL guys, but I think he's a guy who, at 6 foot or so, maybe a buck 80 or so, not a massive wingspan or anything like that, but he's got those quicks, right? He's going to make defenders fall over when he makes his cuts. He's going to outrun them down the field, and he's got really reliable hands. And there's a place for that kind of player on any team in the country. So yeah, look for Vance Spafford to remain one of the higher rated receivers throughout the cycle.
I think some interesting context that, Nebraska fans specifically might not know with him. He's got a 4-star quarterback and he's got a 4-star wide receiver teammate in Phillip Bell, who is another guy that is a year older than him and a guy that, is highly recruited as well. And you go back and look at Mission Viejo last year, Spafford was the go-to target, not the older Bell. And I think that says a lot about who Spafford is as a player, that relationship that his quarterback, Luke Fahey, and him have.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's gonna he's gonna keep that production up. I think I really like what he's gonna be able to do in this offense at the high school level. Certainly, it's gonna be hard for defenses to double team him like he may have been last year, but it's certainly not effective, right? Given his stat line. So I expect a lot more single coverage, and Fahey's going to have plenty of weapons to get the ball downfield to. Probably one of the better receiving cores that we've seen in recent years there, Phillip Bell and Vance Spafford. So I would imagine that offense is going to put up some big numbers this season.
No doubt. And we'll have, obviously coverage on them all fall in over at Inside Nebraska and at Rivals as well. And yeah, I think moving down the list, another guy that kind of came in at the end of July was DeZephen Walker, running back out of Rapec in Missouri, a program that Nebraska's got some familiarity with. They landed Jaden Doss there a couple of cycles ago. He started at receiver for Nebraska. Now he's at wide receiver, and a versatile player. And Walker's a guy that has a relationship with Doss, with the coaching staff, and he's visited Lincoln a couple of times. Obviously, has a lot of these who's in the Midwest in his recruitment right now. But Nebraska's right up there with the best of the best. What do you guys see from Walker? And in this kind of day and age where running backs are so different now, and you look for so many different things, and it feels like one of those positions that's hard to scout just in terms of what projects now. What has y'all so high on Walker?
Yeah, we moved him up right after the I believe the spring camp season. Even though he didn't really do a whole lot, there was a shuffling of the running back rankings, and at the time I thought maybe he was a little high, and I still think we're a little high on the running back group as a whole in 2026. There's a lot of running backs in the Rivals 250. I think too many, given recent NFL draft trends. But I do like Walker's skill set, and I don't make my previous comment based on my opinion of Walker. I do think he's a Rivals 250 running back. I like what he brings to the table. He's not a burner. He's got good straight line speed, but not a burner. He's got a 100 time north of 11 seconds. So we would like that we'd like for that to be a little bit lower, but he does accelerate well. He's pretty shifty in the open field. He can run behind his pads and run some guys over if he needs to, but he's more of a straight line, single cut type of running back who does have better hands than we expected. I know Greg Smith saw him at one of these summer 7-on-7 tournaments, and really liked what he was able to do as a receiver out of the backfield. Is just better than expected. Does have some juice to him though, especially when he gets going out of his stance, or once he gets the ball in his hands. Those first couple of steps are very impressive, and it's going to be tough for teams to really get him on the ground when he catches the ball out of the backfield and even catches the ball down the field. He does have some of those abilities. when like I said, when he's got the ball in his hands, defenders are going to have a difficult time getting him on the ground. There's going to be some continued development there. I like where he's at in his progression at this point, but we'll see how things turn out over the next 4 months, 5 months.
See a guy you can kind of see as like an every down back at the next level. Someone with his size and kind of some of the things he can do as a pass catcher.
He does have a good frame. There is room to fill out there, but at his current size and weight, I would imagine he's more of a first and second down guy than he is more of a third down guy. Even though he does have those receiving abilities, I think he's better coming out of the backfield on handoffs and running downhill there.
Right, right. Sticking in the state of Missouri, Keenan Harris, another linebacker who, like Campbell, has some length to him, and another one that's steadily risen up the rankings as well. You and I have talked about Harris in the past, and he's a guy that I think intrigues both of us. He was back in Nebraska this summer, and he plans to be back in the fall. One of Nebraska's top targets, but they're battling in-state Missouri, Oklahoma, Ohio State, Oregon, USC, et cetera, et cetera. With him specifically, kind of what are the differences, I guess, between a player like him and a player like Campbell?
It's size, honestly. I mean, Keenan Harris is a converted safety, moved into the linebacker role last year, this offseason or so. He's making that transition. 6'1", about 230 pounds right now. Again, not a burner, but I would take Campbell's overall athleticism over Harris, even at that size. He's got that wingspan of about 6'3", 6'4", so longer than he is tall, but not overly long. He does carry that weight really well, though, for a linebacker. When you consider him playing inside the box and being able to cover guys from that position, really like what he's able to do there. He does a good job in coverage. He gets his hands on the ball. He did a lot of that at the Rivals Camp Series events this spring, and we moved him up after seeing him at the one in the Midwest, and I believe it was Ohio, and really like what he's able to do. The projectable traits are still they're there. We're going to look for how they translate on the field this fall. But if he continues to show the progress we've seen this offseason, I would imagine it's still going to be stock up for him.
For sure. With him specifically, you see a guy like that who is a converted safety, and you watch his film, and I think kind of unique for, I guess, a modern day linebacker is he's much better in coverage than he is against the run right now. That'll naturally obviously come with time as he figures it out inside the box. But for that size, like you watch him in coverage against like wide receivers and tight ends and running backs. That's a bit unique, isn't it? Just how natural he is in coverage.
Yeah, I think so. You don't see a ton of them. He's again not overly tall, not overly long, but brings the experience as a coverage guy to the box and being able to take care of those running backs and even some tight ends from the linebacker position will allow defensive coordinators to you really disguise a lot of their schemes and make it difficult for offensive personnel and offensive coordinators to really figure out what the defense is giving them and where to attack.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy Nebraska kind of sees as an every down linebacker, someone they don't want to take off the field. They want to move him all over. They've got in that 3-3-5 defense. They play him sometimes at the edge, sometimes in coverage, sometimes just strictly against the run, reading through blocks. This Nebraska staff loves them. There's some mutual interest there just because Nebraska and Missouri were two of the first schools to offer. And he straight up just told me, he's like, when it comes down to it, the fact that Nebraska and Missouri were in there so early is going to keep them, at the very top of my mind. And so we'll see if Nebraska can pull them away from the home state Tigers. Obviously, I think Oklahoma is another threat to keep an eye on. Some of these national powers, as he gets out on some of these visits, are other schools to keep an eye on. But Nebraska, an early contender there.
I like that 3-3-5 scheme fit for him. That's a good fit for him, allowing him to play off the ball in space and kind of run and go make a play. I like that fit for him, definitely.
For sure. And, when you think about with him and Campbell, I think this is the first cycle where Nebraska's vision for what they want in a defense is starting to kind of come together. And you see Campbell and why is this slip? Keenan Harris. You see them at the top of the list kind of for this linebacker group right now early on. There's still some time, but you see those two guys that can really run, really athletic, move well in space. And you can kind of see what, linebackers coach Rob Dvorak, defensive coordinator Tony White, what they want this room to look like down the line. Vincent Savers, another guy that is a bit small, like 5'11", maybe even 5'10" right now, but can really run, can really hit. And I think that vision is slowly but surely starting to come together for what they want, that this linebacker room to eventually look like down the line. Sticking in the Midwest, or Tajh Overton, that's a guy that snuck in Nebraska at the very end. That there was that 5-6 days of an open period at the end of July, and he snuck in pretty much on the last day to see Nebraska for the very first time. Is considering coming back in the fall for another game, and this is another one. Jamar Mosey's helped Nebraska make it in early. Overton, a two-way player, plays some offensive line, some school team, a defensive line. And a guy firmly in the Rivals 250 right now. Kind of what do we like? What do we like with him?
Yeah, I really like what he brings to the table on the defensive side of the ball. He's a really disruptive interior defensive lineman. He does a great job with his hands. He's violent. He's quick off the ball. And I really like what he's able to do when he's able to kind of get isolated in one-on-one settings. He does a good job in pursuit as well. I think he's 168 in the Rivals 250 right now. He brings a lot of excellent traits to the field. He's 6'3" or so, about 275 pounds. There's room to physically mature there as he gets older. And I again like the frame. He looks a bit longer than 6'3" on film. We'll get some more verified information there as the process goes forward. But again, yeah, a really solid prospect who I expect to be, remain in the Rivals 250 as we learn more about him and be a potential riser. Like I said, if those measurables come back as favorable.
For sure. That's one that I'm hoping to get, a live eval on this fall, hoping to get down to Oklahoma, make some rounds down there and hoping we can get, just some more eyes on him. And a guy that it fascinates me just because Nebraska loves these like two-way guys. Hudson Parliament's another one. He made his debut in the Rivals 250, but plays both sides of the line. Nebraska likes him at offensive guard. They early on seem to like Overton more on the defensive side of the ball. Both have somewhat similar measurables. And you can kind of see the upside with both on both sides of the ball. But fascinating. I think a guy that for a guy like Overton specifically, I think the fact that so many schools see him like so many polarizing opinions, I guess, on him, where some truly see him as an offensive guy, some truly see him as a defensive guy. Like personally, you watch the tape, and I think just the violence on the defensive side of the ball really stands out.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you kind of hit all the points I was trying to make earlier there. Just a guy who I think is going to be solidly in the Rivals 250 as a defensive tackle, 6'3", 275, like I said there. Good hands, room to physically mature and, bring some pass rushing abilities from the inside, but also has plenty of skills to be a run stopper and somebody who can be relied upon even in short yard situations.
With two-way guys like that, there's a couple of them this cycle, a couple of them we've seen over the years. Two-way guys like that, and when you talk to schools and they do have such polarizing opinions on guys where which side of the ball they fit in, how do you factor those guys that into the rankings? Does versatility help? Does versatility hurt? Is it a situation by situation thing, or kind of because we've seen players who we potentially think is has a higher ceiling maybe on the defensive side of the ball, but he's solely focused on offense. Kind of how do you factor that into rankings?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's kind of on a case by case basis. When you think about position versatility inside the trenches, you look for guys who bring those projectable traits. Strong hands, he's shown that for sure, right? He's got decent length from what we can tell on film. He's flexible. He's an athlete at the position. You got to have that to be a highly rated guy at the position. So, and then you look for after that, you look for how comfortable is he playing that position? Does he have the just natural movement skills to understand, hey, this is how you need to get into your stance, go engage with if you're playing offensive line, this is how you go engage with a defensive lineman and vice versa on the defensive side of the ball. So, we're looking at all of that. We had that discussion, I think, with Lamar Brown too. One of the big time offensive line, defensive line, two-way players there in this class. So, we'll continue to evaluate that as the process goes forward. But for right now, kind of like him as a defensive tackle.
Right. And I know it makes it kind of frustrating too to project those guys and then, not selfishly, but like those players get to college and they're like, "Hey, I want to stick on the offensive side of the ball," when everyone around them has told them, "Hey, you're better on the defensive side," and they stick and don't end up panning out just because they are so insistent or like that. But you see cases, kind of both ways. over the years. I think you and I can kind of attest to that. Like over the years, we've seen kind of these different guys that either pan out or don't just because of position projection and how they fit into a scheme, and all of that is so I guess it's so dependent, situations, like you said, case by case. And I think one thing I think you can say for guys that, especially in the trenches that go both ways, one thing you can pretty much automatically check off with them is motor, because there's just the fact that they're playing both ways.
Yeah, I mean, conditioning is not going to be a problem for those guys. So most of the time, it's keeping the good weight on those guys. You see them drop a lot of weight sometimes during the season when they're on the field constantly. These big guys, it's important for them to come in at the right size when they get to the college level, and you want to see them be able to retain weight too. That's something that college programs really work on when these younger players get there, and that's going to be a challenge for Overton as the process goes on. We'll see how he physically matures. Like I keep talking about with him, there's going to be a lot that we learn about him over the next 2 cycles.
For sure. Closing this out with one of the more versatile athletes just in general in this cycle, Brandon Arrington. Recently told me, I guess this last week, that he's planning to come back to Nebraska for the Colorado game. He made his first visit to Nebraska at the end of July, kind of sandwiched that trip in between an Oklahoma visit and Alabama visit. He's got an A&M visit planned this coming weekend to see them take on Notre Dame. Aggies are the early leader there. And but it is quite early in that recruitment. Nebraska's got some good things working for them right now, just because of some relationships they have. Once he was able to see campus, that gave him a couple more boxes that Nebraska was able to check with him. But Arrington, just a fun watch on film. I guess we'll start off here. Kind of, what do you like with him, and then long term, he can play so many different things. Kind of, what do you project with him down the line?
Well, I mean, what do I like about him? I mean, he's one of the fastest people in the entire country, not just football players, not just 2026 players, one of the fastest people in the United States. So you got to start there. Really like his size too, 6'3", 175. That he's going to be able to play a number of different positions there. I think he'll probably end up in the secondary, more than likely as a corner or a safety. But I think cornerback is probably where you start him out as, just because when you got that speed, you're able to take a single player out of the game. You can make up for so many technical deficiencies with that speed too. And he didn't really play a lot of football during the offseason, right? So we haven't gotten a chance to see him really since last year. Really excited to see what he does on the field this year. See where he's been able to make some progress in his game, whether it's footwork, whether it's ball skills, whether it's just football IQ, whether it's being able to add some mass to parts of his frame, lower body, upper body. We'll get a chance to see that this fall. So really like what he brings to the field, though. And every college coach is gonna want somebody with elite speed like him. And boy, is some team gonna get lucky with that when he does sign on the dotted line.
Yeah, that's a guy that's got the who's in his recruitment. One that, right now, again, A&M leads, but I don't think this one's anywhere close to being over. This one's going to shift so many different directions, I feel like, before it's all said and done. But the guy like him, a track guy, surprisingly, you watch him on, not even surprisingly, but for a track guy, I guess, on film, you watch him and fluid hips can kind of move around and change directions really well. You see guys sometimes that do run track and they're very stiff, and it hurts their long-term projection. Like Nick Harbor, I think was one, back in the day that kind of had some of that stiffness just as a true track guy, sort of.
Yeah,
Sort of.
yeah, he was close to making the Olympics, so I'm not going to cut him short there.
Well,
But
for sure, not, yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
he's just so big. He's a receiver slash tight end. I think if he continues on in his football career past college, I think the NFL might make him into a tight end if he's still that size. But straight line speed, it's going to be hard to match up with a guy like Nick Harbor, because he's 6'5", 230 or so. That's just massive. I loved him in high school. He was from my area here in the DC area, and got to see him a lot as a defensive end too. And I thought that he had a fantastic future there if he decided to go that route. But track and catching touchdowns appealed to him a little bit more than coming off the edge. But with Arrington, he's going to have a similar decision to make, right? Is he a guy who's going to want to score and get go down, run routes all game and be a big time target for a quarterback, or is he going to want to shut down an entire basically side of the field if he really develops his skill set to that level?
Yeah, and he's kind of told Nebraska specifically, or at least he's kind of told Nebraska he wants to play DB. Nebraska likes him at DB. His best relationship is Tony White, who's got some familiarity with that San Diego area and just some familiarity with South California in general, and has Nebraska involved pretty early on. Has already visited his school back when he was at Helix. He visited him at Helix, visited him at Mount Miguel this past spring. Now got him on campus back in July. Is getting him back on campus next month. And Nebraska's hoping that his relationships on staff, kind of the role they have in mind for him, the opportunity to run track and play football at Nebraska, all of these different things can help Nebraska at least stick in this recruitment for some time. Even with USC in there, Texas A&M, Georgia, Notre Dame, the who's like I said in that recruitment. So that's one that I think is going to be a fascinating recruitment and just a player to watch. I would recommend for the fans, if you got a free Friday night, you have an opportunity to kind of tune into some high school games, tune into Mount Miguel. They've got some talented players. Arrington, the headliner, of course, but some talented 26s and 27s over there. And yeah, Adam, before we let you get out of here, just wanted to ask for you this season, what are some games you're excited to watch, high school wise, college wise? Where football season's right around the corner. Started in some states, but for us here in Nebraska, just right around the corner, one more week away. And are there any games, at least in this early slate, you're really excited about?
Yeah, well, last night I was watching the what is it, the Corner Canyon and IMG game, I think is what it was, and Jerome Miles, the receiver there, an absolute burner, 10 foot, 10-3, 100-meter guy. He was hurt a little bit last year, so he didn't get a ton of game film, but he went off against IMG, who certainly has a great secondary there, and it was great to see a guy who we just moved up in the rankings to 98 in the country, really go off like that. They pulled off the upset over IMG, which was just certainly a major surprise there with how loaded IMG is. But Jerome Miles is a guy who I was really excited to see in a big time atmosphere against real competition. And similarly, another big time receiver I'm excited to learn more about is Quincy Porter. We haven't seen him since last season, the Bergen Catholic receiver, North Jersey, a big time program there. They play IMG coming up here, I think, next week. And again, another secondary who is really talented. Lots of big time guys at IMG, and a big time receiver who is going to be able to kind of get some work in. He hasn't done anything since the end of last season, so this is going to be a big stage for him. It's going to tell us a lot about where he's at in his progression and what we can expect from him when he does arrive at Ohio State next year.
For sure. Miles is a guy that I kind of pushed Nebraska to try and offer this summer, especially once he backed off that Ole Miss pledge. Nebraska did finally offer in July, but maybe a little too late to the party. Utah's trending. He's got a top group kind of heading into a decision here soon. But Nebraska did make the top 10 for Helaman Kasuga, his quarterback, who's lit it up over the first 2 weeks of the season. I think he's thrown for over 400 yards each in the last 2 weeks or so. I think it's somewhere like that.
He's doing a great job. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's been a riser for us as well, and he's certainly not letting us down right now.
For sure. That's another one, Texas A&M, an early leader in, but Nebraska hoping to make up some ground. They'll get him on campus this fall. Adam, we appreciate you joining the show. Always a pleasure. Hope to have you back on at some point this season. And yeah, man, good luck this fall.
Thanks a lot, Tim. Really appreciate you having me on here.
Yes, sir. Of course.